right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever in the world you may be. Thank you so much for joining us today as we focus on first steps for our international undergraduate students. My name is Grace Fuller. I get to serve as the manager of international experience and engagement here at the International Services Office, and I'm joined by my colleague Jessica, who I'll invite to introduce herself.
Yes, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from in the world. I'm so happy to have you here. My name is Jessica Boyle. I am an international student advisor, also here in the International Services and Engagement Office, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers.
So first off, we just want to congratulate you. We're so excited to begin interacting with our new cohort of students. We were able to meet some students at Triton Day, and it was just so fun. It's like such a unique energy when we have our new students join us. So we're really, really excited. We hope that these series of pre-arrival webinars will be really helpful for you. They're designed to really come alongside you and assist you in the process as you begin to prepare for your time at UC San Diego. So a little bit about today's webinar. So as a reminder, you are in listen-only mode, so you can hear us, but unfortunately we can't hear you. So the main way that we'll interact together today is through that Q&A feature on your Zoom menu bar. You are invited to submit questions throughout each webinar, but please know that we will cover a lot of information, so we invite you to take a minute and see if your question might get answered through the content of the presentation, and we will always have time dedicated at the end of each webinar for open question and answer. Finally, we are recording, so you can access this webinar recording as well as sign up for future webinars at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. And this is just a friendly reminder of what that Q&A feature might look like. And please do note that we will try to answer as many questions as we can. But if for some reason we don't get to your specific question, you can always reach out to our office via icontact.ucsd.edu. Okay, so here's a little snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. We're going to do an overview of the International Services and Engagement Office. We do have some important reminders from undergraduate admissions that we want to share. Then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about what it might look like to apply for your Form I-20 or DS 2019, ending with some approaching deadlines and reminders, some upcoming webinars and additional resources, and like I mentioned previously, having that dedicated time for open question and answer. So to begin with the International Services and Engagement Office, who are we? So we are so lucky to have around 30 professional staff and 15 student staff that are really here to support you and your unique experience as an international student here at UC San Diego. Many of our students might know us as quote unquote like the immigration office, and that is correct. We will issue your Form I-20 DS 2019 for your F1 or your J1 student visa, but we really see ourselves as here for your holistic support. Many students will come to our office with lots of different questions, and even if we are not the office to maybe answer that question or have that specific expertise in that area, we really see ourselves as connectors, working with our campus partners to make sure that you feel supported throughout your journey. And I always love to get the opportunity to brag a little bit on our students. So I consider us so lucky that we get to be among a top 10 institution in terms of hosting international students in the US. You can see that we have just under 4,000 currently enrolled international undergraduate students, under 4,000 graduate students, making for under 8,000 currently enrolled international students, as well as supporting over 2,000 who are working after graduation. So our total service population is around 10,000 international students, and it's just an incredible community that we get to be a part of here. It's a truly like global experience, and you make it what it is. So we are, again, just so excited and thankful for you to be a part of our Triton community. And so with that, just the warmest of welcomes. We're so glad you're here, and we're so excited for you to get started. So now transitioning into some of the first steps. So on behalf of our colleagues in undergraduate admissions, just a friendly reminder to make sure you log into that applicant portal, right? So by logging into your applicant portal, you're going to see your enrollment checklist. And these are the very first pieces of information you need to do because this will kind of allow you to complete some of the next steps of your journey. So the first is accepting that offer of admission. I know that sometimes our students get so excited that they're admitted into UC San Diego that they kind of get swept up and they're like, yeah, of course. but don't necessarily actually accept that offer. Make sure you do, because that will actually kind of domino affect a few other pieces that will be really important. And then the second piece that I want to call your attention to is completing the California residency for tuition purposes questionnaire. So I know I got a few questions about this specifically at Triton Day. Many students are curious about this of what does residency mean for tuition purposes, California residency, international residency, et cetera. That is actually handled by our Office of the Registrar, but this website that I've put in the chat specifically will speak to that in a little bit more detail and probably answer some of those questions as well. And then finally, so after you accept your offer admission via your applicant portal, 2 to 3 days later, you will receive an email asking you to create your Triton Link Active Directory and your Duo account. So this is what I was referring to, is it's accepting that offer admission that then triggers these next steps, the Triton Link Active Directory and the Duo account. And these are essentially tools that you will use to almost log into every portal here at UC San Diego. So they're really, really important. It's going to be what activates your UC San Diego PID and email. So you'll receive an email that looks a lot like this. We put a screenshot on the slide to help you kind of visually reference what to expect. But definitely be on the lookout, because once you have your PID and email, you can then go ahead and start to do things like use iPortal and request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. And I won't go too much into depth here because I know that Jessica is going to provide you with a wealth of information. But I do want to highlight inewstudent.ucsd.edu. So we hope that in addition to these pre-arrival webinars, that this website will function as a really helpful resource for you to refer back to. So you can always go here. This image on the left is going to be that landing page. So that's what you're going to first see, and you'll choose your education level. So many of you will choose undergraduate students for earning your bachelor's degree. And then it will take you to this next screen, and we've broken it down step by step so that you get in the information when you need it, when it's applicable to you, right? So many of you will be in step 1, requesting your immigration documents, and it's going to go through the process. So while Jessica is going to provide so much information, we know that it can be a lot at the beginning. It can be a lot to kind of digest. And this is really meant for you to refer back to and be like, oh, what was that next thing I need to do? And this will have it broken down for you. And with that, I hand it to Jessica to talk a little bit about applying for your US visa.
Thank you, Grace. All right. Yes. So as Grace mentioned, we're going to be covering a lot of information in this webinar. This recording will be posted on our inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu website for you to go back and access in about a week. But also our iNewStudent website has all this information that I'm about to share and more. So I encourage you just to listen and take in and start to get a sense of what are the steps you'll need to take to get started on your visa process. So here at ISEO, we break the visa process down into 6 steps. And I want to start by just giving you an overview of this as the immigration journey that you will work through between now and arriving at UC San Diego. So step 1 is to request and receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office, the International Services and Engagement Office. This also applies to students who may be planning to transfer their CVIS record if you are currently in the United States on an F1 or J1 visa, and so thinking, I don't need to go through the visa process because I already have a visa. Well, that may be true, but you do still need to request and receive a Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office. So this first step is applicable to everyone, regardless of whether you already have a visa or not. If you are in need of an F1 or J1 visa stamp in order to enter the United States, then the next step, once you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019, will be to schedule your visa interview. This will involve submitting the visa application, which is called the Form DS 160, to your local US Embassy or consulate, and also paying the required fees associated with that application. Step 3 is you'll then attend your visa interview on the scheduled date. And upon successful completion of your visa interview and application process, the U.S. Embassy or Consulate will provide you with your F1 or J1 visa stamp. You'll then be able to plan your travel to the United States. The visa process doesn't stop once you have just gotten your visa stamp. There are actually two more steps. So once you have your Form I-20 and DS 2019, plus your F1 or J1 visa stamp, you then need to successfully enter the United States. And this is called applying for entry at the port of entry or going through customs. And upon successfully getting through customs, you'll be able to arrive to UC San Diego. So the last step in the visa process is to actually arrive to UCSD and complete what is called the CVIS check-in process in order for us, our office, to activate your F1 or J1 status. This will be a form that you submit to our office showing proof that you have successfully entered the US under your F1 or J1 visa. And once you've submitted that check-in form, then as I said, our office will activate your F or J status and you will be an active status international student in the United States. So today we're going to be looking at just the first step in this entire process, which is how to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office. This upcoming Thursday, April 18th at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, we're going to be holding our next pre-arrival webinar where we're going to discuss the next 3 steps in this process, which is the visa application process, so applying for the actual visa stamp. So we're going to look at once you've gotten your Form I-20 or DS 2019, how do you actually apply for that visa stamp? If you haven't yet registered for this next pre-arrival webinar, you can do that by visiting inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. And I really hope you join us and that we'll see you later this week for that next pre-arrival webinar. All right, so let's dive into step 1. How do you request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office? Before I get into the specifics of how you do that, I do want to just pause and say again that if you are currently in the United States on an F1 visa and you're hoping to transfer your CVIS record, your F1 record to UC San Diego. So what this looks like is maybe you're currently attending community college and you're going to be coming to UC San Diego in the fall as a transfer student. Even in that case, even though you already have an F1 visa, you are still required to request and receive a Form I-20 from our office. And in addition to doing that, there are other steps you're going to need to take to move or transfer your CVIS record from your current school to UC San Diego. So if you're currently attending school in the US as an international student, I want to really encourage you to join us on May 3rd at 8:30 a.m. for our CVIS Transfers pre-arrival webinar. This is going to be a pre-arrival webinar that specifically looks at how do you communicate with your current school and with our office to move your CVIS record from your current school to us. The link to register for that CVIS Transfers pre-arrival webinar is going to be available soon at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. Okay. So if you are in need of an F1 or J1 visa stamp, I want to briefly start by explaining what the Form I-20 or DS 2019 is. So in order to apply for your F1 visa stamp, you do first need to receive your Form I-20. Or in order to apply for your J1 visa stamp, you do first need to receive your Form DS 2019. This is because the Form I-20 or the Form DS 2019 is the certificate of visa eligibility for the F1 or J1 visa category. So in other words, the Form I-20 or DS 2019 lets your local US consulate or embassy know that you've been admitted to UC San Diego and that you are seeking a US visa in order to come to the United States as a student. So you do need to receive the Form I-20 or DS 2019 before you can apply for your visa stamp. A common question we sometimes get from students is, well, can I go ahead and schedule my visa interview while I'm still waiting to get this form? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. You will need the information on this Form I-20 or DS 2019 in order to schedule your visa interview. You can request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office via the iPortal, which is what we are going to talk about next. So our office, ISEO, the International Services and Engagement Office, uses an online portal called iPortal to intake service requests. In other words, to request a service or a document from our office, you have to submit the relevant request form in iPortal. iPortal is currently open for you to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 and can be accessed by logging in at iportal.ucsd.edu using your UC San Diego single sign-on Active Directory account. Now, if you remember, the Active Directory account is one of the things that you will set up after you have accepted your offer of admission. So going back to the undergraduate admission first steps that Grace discussed earlier, once you are offered admission at UC San Diego, you need to log into your applicant portal and accept your offer of admission and complete the residency questionnaire. 2 to 3 days after that, you'll be getting an email letting you know that instructions to activate your Triton Link Active Directory account are now available for you to follow. Those instructions will be posted in your applicant portal. That Active Directory account is going to set up your UC San Diego personal identification number, which we call your PID. It's your UC San Diego student ID number, as well as your UC San Diego email. And that UC San Diego email is going to become your main login credentials, along with the password that you set up to access all of UC San Diego's systems, including iPortal. Once you have access to iPortal, you'll need to submit a new admit service request. So as a newly admitted student, there are specific service request forms in iPortal that are denoted with the terminology new admit that you will need to choose the correct form for you in order to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. If you've been admitted to a program that starts with the start of the fall quarter, which is going to be most students, you will submit the new Admit I-20 or DS 2019 request. That is the name of the request form that you will see in iPortal. If you have been admitted to a program that requires you to begin in the summer, and that is specifically the 3 programs you see on the screen here in front of you, that is the Computer Science and Engineering's summer program for incoming students, also known as SPICE, S-P-I-S, or the Jacobs School of Engineering Summer Engineering Institute, SEI, or the Materials Science and Engineering Department's Research Immersion Summer School program. If you have been admitted to one of these 3 summer programs, you will need to submit a different new admit request, which is called the new Admit I-20 or DS 2019 Summer Start Program request. So take note and make sure you submit the right request form in iPortal, because that is going to inform the start date that is printed on your Form I-20 or DS 2019. Instructions for how to submit your new admit request in iPortal, including what documents you'll be required to upload to that request, can be found on our website at inewstudent.ucsd.edu under step 1. So as Grace mentioned earlier, our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website is your one-stop shop to walk you through the stages of your journey to the United States. And step 1 is specifically how to request your immigration documents. So this is where you will find instructions on requesting your Form I-20 or DS 2019, as well as applying for your visa stamp. So on this website, under step 1, in addition to how to set up those UC San Diego accounts, you're going to find information on how to access iPortal. The different new admit forms that we just went over are outlined there, so you'll know which form to submit. On this website, you'll also find instructions on the funding requirements, the amount and types of financial documentation that you will be required to show throughout the visa process. So in order to receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019, as well as when you go for your visa interview at the US consulate or embassy, you will need to bring financial documents that show you have the minimum or more than the minimum amount of funding available to you to fund your program. Our funding requirements webpage the link to that can be found under the step 1 instructions for how to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. You'll want to review that page in depth so that you understand what is the amount of funding I'm required to show for my program, and also what types of financial documentation are acceptable to prove that I have that funding. This website will also walk you through what other documents you might be asked to upload to your iPortal request. This could be things like a copy of your passport, a copy of your admission letter, etc. So I really encourage you before you access iPortal and submit your new admit request that you read through the instructions on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 1 so that you can prepare in advance the information and documents you will be asked to upload as part of your new admit request. Processing time for the Form I-20 or DS 2019 is 15 business days from when you successfully complete and submit your new admit request in iPortal. And I want to call out that it's really important to note that that 15 business day processing time begins when your iPortal request is both successfully completed and successfully submitted. So when you are in iPortal and filling out your new admit request form, it is going to ask you a bunch of questions that you will respond to. And at the end of those questions, it is going to automatically save your form. You will then need to go back into the request, upload the required documents, and submit it. So there's kind of a two-step process, which you'll see once you get into iPortal, is respond to the questions in the form, save the form, go back and upload the required documents, and submit the form. If you submit your iPortal request incomplete, meaning either there is information missing, maybe you didn't quite answer all the questions, or maybe you didn't upload the right documents, or there are documents missing that we are required to collect from you, when an ISEO student advisor reviews that request, they are going to set the status of the request to incomplete. You will get an email notification to your UC San Diego email from iPortal saying, hey, your iPortal request is incomplete. More information is needed from you. You'll then need to log back into iPortal, fix whatever is missing, or upload new documents to your iPortal request and resubmit the request. Only once your request is successfully completed, meaning all the information and documents we need are there, does that 15 business day processing time start. So just to reiterate what we talked about on the previous slide, please make sure you read through the inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 1 so that you know in advance what's going to be asked of you when you are requesting your Form I-20 or DS 2019. Being able to submit your new admit request correctly the first time is going to help you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 as quickly as possible within that 15 business day processing time. Once that processing time completes and your Form I-20 or Form DS 2019 has been issued, it will be uploaded to your new admit request in iPortal for you to access. And from there, you'll be able to download it, print it, and sign it by hand. Now, a common question we get from students is, can I sign this form electronically or digitally? And unfortunately, the answer is no. So the US government does allow universities to digitally and electronically sign and send the Form I-20 or DS 2019, but you, the student, are required to print this form and sign the form by hand. You'll be required to show the printed and hand-signed document at your visa interview and also when you are coming through customs to enter the United States. So you'll need to find a printer and make sure you print this form and sign it by hand. All right, so that is the first step in the visa process. Once you've gotten that Form I-20 or DS 2019, you'll have the information you need to submit your visa application to your local US Embassy or consulate and schedule your visa interview. So again, just a reminder, join us this upcoming Thursday, April 18th, 2 days from now at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time for our next pre-arrival webinar, where we're going to look at steps 2, 3, and 4 of this visa process. How do you submit your visa application to your local US Embassy and Consulate, schedule your visa interview, and what to expect at that visa interview, and then how to plan your travel to the US once you get your visa stamp. So I hope you join us.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica. So I'm going to give you a little snapshot on ways that you can already start to get engaged in our Triton community here at UC San Diego. First is giving you an overview of our programs. So these are our signature programs. They are engagement opportunities that we host throughout the year. I'll give a brief overview, but I would invite you to go to iprograms.ucsd.edu to find out a little bit more about each one of them. So Global Coffee Hour is our once a month coffee hour. We have lots of coffee and pastries, and we invite our global community to gather and just get to know one another. We are so lucky to have international students, scholars, families here, and our staff really appreciate the chance to get to meet you in person, maybe after we've been interacting online for so long. English in Action is an English conversation program where folks get to practice their English speaking skills with a native English speaker to meet once a month. Triton Trekkers is our collaboration with Outback Adventures. So we host trips to just explore the beautiful backyard of San Diego. So whether that's kayaking the Cove or hiking Torrey Pines or rock climbing, there are so many different things that we get to do and take advantage of being here. ISAC stands for International Student Advisory Council. This is a leadership opportunity that meets once a month to discuss issues impacting the international student experience here at UC San Diego. iTable is our basic needs program meant to address food insecurity for international students. And Intercultural Social Hour is another monthly social hosted in the afternoons that gathers our international community. One program that I really want to highlight specifically for this group is our Global Ambassador Program. So this is a summer-long peer mentorship program that matches incoming international undergraduate students with current UC San Diego undergraduate students. You can sign up for GAP by either scanning the QR code that you see on your screen here. You can also learn more information about the Global Ambassador Program, or GAP, at gap.ucsd.edu. And then finally, our iEvents calendar is a live calendar filled with all of the different events that we have going on. So you'll find many of our events happening on the iEvents calendar, but we also have some of our fellow offices populating the events here, as well as our student orgs. So any events that maybe target international students and invite them to participate as the audience or have a global engagement focus will be featured on our iEvents calendar. And finally, we are active on social media. So I know that it can feel like a little bit far away, but if you do want to connect with your Triton community, please follow us. We're very active on Instagram, so istudents.ucsd.edu, but we're also active across platforms and social. So on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and all of that good stuff. And now I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about some additional resources before we get into our question and answer. So some deadlines and reminders. Like Jessica mentioned, you can start requesting your Form I-20 or DS 2019 via the iPortal now. And again, you won't be able to do so until you've accepted your offer of admission. And then typically it is 2 to 3 business days before you'll get that single sign-on. So your Active Directory, your Duo, PID, and UCSD email. So do allow some time for that. But once you have those things, you can access iPortal. Additionally, you can also apply for on-campus housing. So we hope that you'll join us next Tuesday, where we'll talk more about what it looks like to apply for on-campus housing as well as off-campus additionally. So if you're curious about housing in San Diego, we hope you'll join us for that webinar. In mid-May, our on-campus housing contracts are due. So if you are living on campus, you'll work with housing, dining, and hospitality. And then in July will be the deadline to submit health immunization requirements. And we will actually have a pre-arrival webinar focusing on student health next Thursday. And so we'll have our colleagues join us then to talk a little bit more in detail about that. And then finally, September is a really exciting month. So that's typically when we get to meet you in person. There's lots of things going on. So tuition is due, and there's move-in, and there's check-in, and then there's a number of orientations. So if you are an undergraduate student, typically you will have your college orientation as well as new international student orientation. And you can learn more about that via iorientation.ucsd.edu. Okay, so like I mentioned, and as Jessica mentioned as well, this Thursday we'll be focusing more on applying for your US visa. Next Tuesday, the 23rd, undergraduate student housing, and the 25th, student health, insurance, and immunization requirements. We'll also have some webinars in May talking about finances and student accounts. On May 3rd, that CVIS transfer process that Jessica noted, and on May 9th, talking a little bit more about campus safety. So all webinars will be recorded and posted at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. We do ask, typically it takes our team a week of turnaround time for those to be posted. So we appreciate your patience there. And then you can register for upcoming webinars via that website as well. Okay, so I know that we already have a couple good questions in the chat. So let me turn it over to Jessica to see which ones you'd like to speak to.
Yes, thank you. And just a reminder, so if you do have questions, this is going to be our time of question and answer. So please go ahead and drop those in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will work through those questions. So I want to start with, we have a question from someone who's currently on an H-4 visa and wondering about starting their program here at UC San Diego while they're on that H-4 visa and then transitioning to the F-1 visa midway through their program. So this is common for students who may be in the United States as a dependent under someone who holds a visa in a different category. So maybe your parent is here on a work visa, such as the H-1B, you would be here then as a dependent H-4 visa holder. And many visa categories do have dependents age out at a certain point in time. That typically falls sometime when you're doing your bachelor's degree. So yes, it is possible to transition from a one visa category to another, specifically to a student visa, such as the F-1 visa or the J-1 visa. If you are in this scenario, we would encourage you to stop by our online advising, or if you're in San Diego, to stop by our front desk and make an appointment with one of our student advisors to discuss the options that you have for moving from your current visa category to a student visa. There's typically more than one route that you can choose from to transition to the F or J visa, and one of our student advisors would be able to talk with you in more depth what that process looks like and what your options are, and also kind of help you figure out the timeline. It is great if you are one of those people who likes planning ahead and wants to get started. Once you have started your program at UC San Diego, so once the fall quarter kicks off, we would encourage you to stop by our online advising or our front desk and speak to the student advisor. Definitely, we would say at least a year out from when you are hoping or needing to make that visa transition, you should talk to us no later than about a year out to start that planning. But certainly you can begin that earlier if that will give you peace of mind. All right, and so we also have a question about the DS-160. So the DS-160 is the visa application form. It is the form for a non-immigrant to apply for a visa stamp. It is the form that you will submit online to your U.S. embassy, local U.S. embassy or consulate, in order to then be able to schedule your visa interview. So this is part of step 2 after you have received your Form I-20 or DS-2019. The next step then is to submit the DS-160 to apply for your visa stamp. The DS-160 does have a lot of questions on it. There's guides online that you can find to kind of know in advance, what is this form going to be asking me? One of the things it does ask for is known points of contact in the United States. And this may, I'm not sure if maybe the person who asked this question, there may be 2 points in the DS-160 application where it's asking you for contact information of someone in the United States. One may be, it does ask if you have any relatives or family that are in the United States. You should respond to that question accordingly if you do. However, it is also going to ask you for the contact information of your international advisor here at UC San Diego. At ISEO, our office, we do not have advisors that we assign to each student. So we have many advisors, I think maybe almost 15 international student advisors, and whichever advisor is available when you contact or stop by our office will be the person that you speak to regarding the question you have at that time. So there is not a specific person that is your specific international advisor. When you are filling out the DS-160 and it asks you for the contact information for your international advisor, You will need to provide our general office phone number and email, which you can find on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 1. And you'll also use the name of the advisor who issued your Form I-20 or DS 2019, which you will find printed on your Form I-20 or DS 2019. So we are going to go over that again in more detail in terms of filling out the DS 160 at our pre-arrival webinar this upcoming Thursday.
Okay, so we have another question that's come through. How much time is normally required to complete the entire process of applying for your F1 or J1 visa?
Thank you, Grace. This is a great question. The time for this process varies depending where in the world you are applying for a US visa and many other factors that might just be circumstantial to your particular situation. So generally speaking, we would encourage you to get started on the visa process no later than 3 months before when you plan to arrive to the United States. However, 3 months is short sometimes for the visa process, so you should start this process now. If you have accepted your offer of admission to UC San Diego, you know this is where you are planning to attend in the fall, request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 now, get started on the visa process now, don't wait. The reason for this is because it is common as we head into the summer months for students to experience visa delays, and these can look many different ways. Sometimes this is appointment availability at your local US embassy or consulate. So the fall is the traditional start of the school year in the United States, which means that every international student who is planning to come to the US for school this fall is going through the visa process starting now and into the summer months. So it creates a lot of volume of visa application requests at US embassies and consulates around the world that can make it difficult to find available appointments. So sometimes you might experience you go to schedule your visa interview and the next available interview is 2 or 3 months from now. Obviously, if you have waited until the last minute to start that process, that's going to be very stressful, right? Because you need to obtain your visa before classes start and get here before classes start. So 3 months, no later than 3 months is what we recommend, but we would recommend don't wait until then. If you know UC San Diego is where you're coming in the fall, accept your offer of admission and get started on the visa process now.
Great, thank you. We have another good question in the chat asking about when does on-campus orientation begin in September? And I want to speak to this question because for orientation purposes, you are lucky enough that you get to attend multiple. So if you are an undergraduate student, you will likely attend your college orientation in addition to international orientation. So the first link I'm going to put in the chat is our Triton Weeks of Welcome website. So that's twow.ucsd.edu. That gives an overview of all the different things that are happening during our Triton Weeks of Welcome, including the different orientations. The next link I'm going to put in the chat is where you can find maybe more information about your specific college orientation. So when you are admitted to UC San Diego, you are admitted to a specific college as an undergraduate student. And each one of these colleges will have slightly different dates in terms of their college orientation. So you can select the icon that matches your college, and that will give you more information. Some of our offices on campus are still kind of determining those dates, our office included, so they may not have finalized dates, but they will be able to give you an idea. For example, for international orientation, it's likely that we'll have our virtual orientation pieces starting in like early mid-September, around the 9th. We have those as virtual because we know that many students are traveling during those times, and so we want to make those accessible with more in-person opportunities starting around September 16th, so mid-September, knowing that many of our students will have likely arrived in the US more closer to that date. And then the last link I'm going to put in the chat is our academic calendar. So as a note for fall 2024, the quarter begins on Monday, September 23rd, and instruction begins on Thursday, September 26th. So UC San Diego is in the quarter system, which means we do start a little bit later than most other institutions in the US who are on a semester system. So it's important to keep that in mind, and just to keep in mind that you will have different requirements for both college as well as international orientation, and that will kind of be consistent throughout your time here, making sure that you're meeting any college requirements as well as requirements for your international student status as well. All right. So our next question asks, when can I come to the US using my F1 visa if I am applying to start in fall quarter?
Yeah, great question. And actually, before I answer that, Grace, if I can add something to the previous question. So on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 2, so this is after you have received your Form I-20 and DS 2019, after you've gotten your F1 or J1 visa stamp. Under step 2 on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website, you're going to find information on how to plan your travel to San Diego, in how to make housing arrangements, including also orientations that you are required to attend. So as Grace mentioned, your college orientation, Triton Weeks of Welcome, our orientation for international students, I-orientation. All that information is on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website and will be updated with dates there as it becomes available. If you have set up your Triton Link Active Directory account and therefore you have your UC San Diego email, you will also be receiving or begin receiving, if you have not already, our iNew student newsletters. And these will go out starting now throughout the summer and leading up to the start of the fall quarter. Orientation information, particularly details about I-orientation, will be in those newsletters as well. So I know sometimes it's very exciting to want to plan for the dates in September, but make sure you are prioritizing your visa process, and we would encourage you not to book flights or plan travel until you have received your visa stamp. We're going to talk more about why and how to plan your travel and what to be aware of at our pre-arrival webinar on Thursday. So to pick up with the next question, when can I come to the US using my F1 visa if I'm applying for fall quarter? F1 and J1 students are able to enter the United States no more than 30 days in advance of the program start date that is printed on their Form I-20 or DS 2019. And we are going to, again, talk about this in more detail at our pre-arrival webinar on Thursday. We'll take a look at what the Form I-20 and DS 2019 looks like and where you can find your program start date and how you calculate what that date means for when are you able to enter the United States by.
All right, so we have some more good questions. Our next question reads, if I am planning on staying in the US during the summer after studying at my current US high school, will I need to check in to activate my F1 status as well?
Yes, this is a great question. So the short answer is yes. It sounds like in this case, you may be a CVIS transfer student, meaning from an immigration perspective, you might be currently attending high school in the US on an F1 visa, and you are then hoping to transfer your CVIS record, your F1 record, from your high school to UC San Diego for the fall. I encourage you again to join us on May 3rd for our CVIS transfers pre-arrival webinar. We're going to go over this process in depth. There's some pieces that you are responsible to do to move your CVIS record from your high school to UC San Diego. So make sure you attend that pre-arrival webinar or watch the recording afterward. Um, when you are a CVIS transfer student and you are issued what's called a transfer pending I-20 from UC San Diego, yes, you do, upon your arrival to UC San Diego, still need to complete the check-in process to reactivate your F1 status now as a student at UC San Diego. So you will need to submit the check-in form.
Wonderful. We have another question about H4. So the student is wondering that if they're hoping to enter UC San Diego on their H4 visa, what is the best way to give UCSD their H4 documents?
Yeah, thanks for checking on this. So we actually do not require you to provide us with any documents related to your H4 status. If you are currently going on a different visa status and will be attending UC San Diego, so I should say, if you're on a non-student visa and you will be attending UC San Diego in that status, you do not need to submit any forms to us to prove your status. However, like any time you are on a visa, in a visa category in the United States, make sure you are retaining documents for your own records so that if you were ever asked for proof of your status, you would be able to produce those, but we do not require you to submit those to us.
Wonderful. Okay, so our next question reads, I'm currently waiting on one waitlist offer from another school. if I were to accept and commit there,
Mm.
how would I get my CVIS I-20 or DS 2019 transferred?
This is a great question, and it actually is fairly complicated and specific to each student. So this is a question I would actually ask you to stop by our online advising and speak with an international student advisor about the specifics of this case. Um, it is not always possible to receive a Form I-20 from your intended school and then transfer that to another school if you have not started attending that school. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, and it really depends on your specific timeline and also what your other institution is willing to accept. So if this is something that you are not sure, you're trying to still decide which school will you attend, stop by our online advising and speak to an international student advisor so that you can understand your options in a situation like this.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is, I have already submitted my form request for my Form I-20. When can I expect to receive it back?
Yeah, so as a reminder, processing time to receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from when your iPortal new admit request is successfully completed and submitted is 15 business days. When you are in iPortal and you look at your new admit request, you will see there is a field called due date. That date is the 15 business day processing time due date if your iPortal request, assuming that your iPortal request is successfully complete and submitted. So if you did not submit your iPortal request correctly, that date may not be relevant, but until you hear from an ISEO student advisor that more information is needed, you can assume that your iPortal request will be completed and your Form I-20 or DS 2019 issued by the due date you see on the request.
Wonderful. Okay, so our next question is about financial documentation. So what is considered up to date for financial documentation? For example, is a financial statement from October of last year still applicable?
Great question. So, Grace, would you mind, or I can screen share as well? I'd like to show everyone what our funding requirements webpage looks like. So again, the link to this funding requirements webpage, I know Grace dropped it in the chat a while back. It is also accessible via our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 1 when you are looking through the instructions of what documents you need to upload to your new admit request. I really encourage you to read through this webpage again before you start working on your new admit request in iPortal. So as a newly admitted student, you'll see here in this first section, how much funding do I need to show? You'll want to look under the newly admitted students dropdown to understand if you're going to be an F1 student or a J1 student, what are your requirements in terms of how much funding you will need to prepare or show as part of your visa process. If we scroll down a little more, you'll see this next section details acceptable sources of funding. And in particular, and in response to this question, there are 3 things that all financial documents that you use for the visa process need to have in common. So all financial documents have to be less than 3 months old at the time you submit them to our office. So a document of a financial statement issued in October would not be sufficient for the F1 and J1 funding requirements because it is the middle of April. October is more than 3 months ago. So your financial documents do have to be dated with an issue date that shows they were issued no more than 3 months ago from when you are submitting them in your new admit request. All financial documents and all documents you submit for the visa process, so whether that's documents you're submitting to our office as part of your new admit request or documents you bring to your visa interview at the consulate, all documents you use for the visa process have to be in English. If you cannot get them in English from the institution, then such as a bank or whatnot, you may need to get them officially translated by a certified translation service. So keep that in mind. Sometimes that piece requires a bit of preparation, right, before you have the document ready to submit to us. And then for funding documents, the Form I-20 and DS 2019 and the F1 and J1 visa categories require that the funding you are putting forward as proof that you can afford your time of living and studying in San Diego, in this case, have to show cash liquid assets, meaning those funds are immediately available and accessible to you. So when you submit financial documentation, that documentation cannot show that those funds are locked up or frozen. Or if they are in something like a term deposit or fixed deposit account, they need to show a maturity date. That maturity date has to be before the start of the term that you will be beginning your program at UC San Diego. You'll notice this first drop down in this section is what financial documentation is accepted. This is a really helpful chart of all the different types of financial documents that you might acquire and whether or not we can accept them. And if we can accept them, what are the criteria those documents need to show? So please use this as a guide as you are trying to figure out, okay, how do I prove that I have the funding required to meet the F1 and J1 funding requirements? And then last but not least, the very bottom section of this webpage is the actual amount required. So I'm assuming most of you on this webinar are undergraduate students. You will expand this and look under that second column, new admit, and see this total amount of funding. That is the minimum amount of funding you must show on your financial documents in order to be eligible for the Form I-20 or DS 2019. Note that the DS 2019 and the Form I-20 have different funding requirements. So sometimes you may need to do a little bit of math using this chart. Again, refer to the top of this page, the newly admitted students drop down to understand if I'm an F1 student, how many months of funding do I need to show? If I'm a J1 student, how many months of funding do I need to show? All this information is outlined here on our website to help you. So take some time to read through it. It's going to set you up well to move through the visa process.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so our next question asks, are there any social groups that I can use to connect with my future classmates? I'm so glad you asked. This is a very fun question for me. So the first thing I would highly encourage you to do is to sign up for our Global Ambassador program, our peer mentorship program. The reason I say that is, one, that's something that you can already have a mentor. You could already have a connection here at UC San Diego. And when you're filling out that form, it will ask you about yourself. So it will ask you, one, what are you looking for in terms of a mentor? Are you looking for someone who is in the same college as you? Maybe from the same home country, maybe sharing the same major. But then you will also be asked just like general interests. And that is to, one, both be able to match you with a mentor, but two, it also is able for your mentor to get to know you a little bit. So as much as we try our best to match with someone who might be share similar interest, it's likely that they won't share every single identity and interest that you have. However, if they know that you're really interested in soccer or intramural sports, when they're meeting with you, they might say, hey, here is the link for our intramural sports clubs at UC San Diego, or here's the link to we should go to a soccer game together once you're here. So they can share a lot of very interesting resources with you. Some of the other things I'll mention, and just as a friendly reminder, that again is gap.ucsd.edu. It'll take you here and you'll go from here for the application, for the mentee application. Another thing I'll highlight is starting in June, you'll have access to iTriton. And iTriton is our online Canvas orientation. You'll complete this over the summer, so over the months of June, July, and August. And in iTriton, you will have the opportunity to meet other international students at UC San Diego. So all international students are required to complete iTriton. And there's different ways to connect with your fellow students. So there'll be discussion boards where you'll introduce yourself, and as well as interact with some of your peers. And so that will be another opportunity as well. And then finally, I also invite you to attend some of our upcoming webinars where we'll talk a little bit more in detail about what it looks like to get involved in student life here at UC San Diego. So that's via iNew Student Webinars. You can go ahead and our webinar on May 7th. We'll talk about different student organizations, different ways that you can find interest groups and clubs. So highly recommend that you join us on May 7th. Great question. All right. Our next question reads, when can we start booking accommodation at UCSD? Can we do so as soon as we apply for the Form I-20 or only after our I-20 has been successfully received?
Great question. So You do not need to wait to receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 to submit your on-campus housing request. You can go to hdh.ucsd.edu to learn more about on-campus housing. We would encourage you to submit that request once you've accepted your offer of admission and set up your student account. You can begin looking into your housing options on campus and submitting that request. In terms of off-campus housing, if you are hoping to live off campus or anyone listening is hoping to live off campus, we would encourage you to, while you can start researching off-campus housing options, we would encourage you to wait to commit financially to anything until you've received your Form I-20 and DS 2019 and your F1 or J1 visa stamp. In other words, until you have the documents that you know will allow you to seek entry to the US. We are again going to go over what to keep in mind when you are planning your travel next Thursday or this upcoming Thursday at our next pre-arrival webinar. But in terms of on-campus housing, no, you don't need to wait. You can go ahead and get started on that process now.
Okay, so that concludes all of our questions for today. Thank you so much for asking such good questions and being such an engaged audience. We're really excited to be able to answer these questions for you and get you the information you need. Um, this kicks off our pre-arrival webinar season specifically for our undergraduate students. So we hope you'll join us for future webinars, again, via inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. And again, you can always contact us and others at our office via icontact.ucsd.edu. All right, take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.